How's everybody doing tonight?
Hey,
Awesome. So we're
good,
back
thank you.
with the Deep Images podcast, and I got Bill Mulligan, CF Roberts, and Justin Cotton. Joining us later will be the great Briggy Williams.
Mhm.
And tonight we're going to dive back into one of our more interesting and inspirational topics, something that we all were very passionate about doing, which is alternative science fiction films. So just real quick recap, that's no franchises. We're not basically, yeah, we're not going to do like Alien, Star Wars, Star Trek, Independence Day, Lord of the Rings. So that's not science fiction, but Planet of the Apes. We could go on and on. Alien, Terminator. Um, that's not to knock any of those. We did a whole episode on I Am Legend films and a whole episode on Planet of the Apes. So it's just a matter of less corporate and more off the beaten path. Like if you're recommending something to someone and they're like, I'm tired of seeing such and such part 8, and I'm tired of just all this formulaic storytelling and CGI. Is there anything new, recent, old, whatever falling off the radar that you'd recommend instead? And of course, I immediately think of, well, a few dozen. So we've already covered quite a bit. So we're going to cover a few more this session. So we're going to start tonight with Bill Mulligan, and take it away, Bill.
Thank you very much. Starting with me because once again I'm kind of doing a drive-through here, hit and run. I'm in upstate New York and got family things going on. I didn't want to miss this, especially when Henry suggested a bunch of things, and two of them immediately struck me as being so completely diametrically opposed to each other that I had to do them both because I love them both in different ways. One of them is an absolute artistic masterpiece, and the other one is the first one I'm going to talk about, which is Flesh Gordon. That's right, Flesh Gordon, not Flash Gordon. They were very careful about that because the folks who made Flash Gordon threatened to sue them, and so they made sure they put on every poster not to be confused with the original Flash Gordon. And yeah, it would have been awkward if mom and dad took you to the drive-in to see Flesh Gordon, because this is 1974, and this was a hardcore sex comedy that they made, but for various reasons, it got cut down to a softcore sex comedy. Still lots of nudity, lots of double entendres. I mean, there's a monster called the Penosaurus, which is exactly what it sounds like. Um, it's a pretty good parody of the not Flash Gordon the movie, but the original Flash Gordon serials,
It's
which are
actually it's actually a
blast to watch.
closer. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, go ahead.
I think it's a closer beat by beat, including the period setting adaptation of the first year of the comic strip than even the Buster Crab one in
Yeah,
some ways.
yeah,
It's
that
kind of
too.
weird.
It's got, and of course, it has the advantage of being in color, so they're able to do some things that the Buster Crab couldn't do. Although I still think those are an absolute blast to
Oh,
watch.
I love those.
Um, so here's the thing: this is directed by Michael Benevenista, who I think got fired halfway through, and Howard Zeem. Somewhere back home in North Carolina, I have a magazine, Close Up magazine from way back when. I did an article on this, and I distinctly remember there was a guy there interviewed talking about the making of Flesh Gordon, and talked about when the director brought in, his version, and they watched it. They were like, "That's a really good rough cut," and he's like, "Well, what do you mean rough cut? That's the final cut." So they fired him. So I'm thinking that was probably Mr. Benaviste, and Howard Zahn finished it. There was a lot of people that got fired on this. Some of the special effects people supposedly got fired, but I think by fired, they quit when they weren't paid. And the people who were involved with this are some of the absolute best special effects people. Mike Miner, Greg Jen, Rick Baker doesn't admit that he worked on this movie, but we're pretty sure he did.
He
And
did.
most importantly, probably David Allen and Jim Danforth, who did the marvelous stop motion animation, which is absolutely terrific. I
Oh,
mean,
it
it's
is.
not Harryhausen quality, but it's pretty darn good. It's certainly better than horror movie quality. And also gives it that nice old fashioned vibe to it. Jim Danforth is listed in the credits as Midge, Petrovnad, which is Jim Danforth spelled backwards. Tough code to break there, Jim. Um, yeah, there's some beautiful glass paintings. There's actual model work. This was, I think they're saying something like a $500,000 movie, although who knows when you're talking about stuff that's pretty much financed by the mob. Um, Joe Trimble was a makeup artist. She was one of the special effects Star Trek writers.
Hmm.
Just there's a lot of solid, good people
Did not Douglas Trumbull do
behind it.
something on this?
Did Douglas Trumbull? Let me just hold
I've
on
read
here.
that several places, but I've never heard him confirm it. But
You know, I don't see
Wow.
that here, but here's the thing with special effects people. They tend to help each other out.
yeah,
It's kind of like if you look at old school 60s, 70s comic book artists, where if you're going to visit your friend and he's in the middle of trying to get something out for Marvel and he's got 2 days deadline creeping up on him, you grab in there and you start penciling stuff too, and suddenly there's an obvious Neil Adams bridge in the middle of a Herb Trimpe Godzilla thing. Things happen.
right.
So at that point, they realized they had spent more on this movie than maybe they intended, and more than they're probably going to get back from a hardcore porno movie.
Mm.
So it was time to maybe see if we could cut back. The other thing that came into play is that the Los Angeles Police Department, which could have put them all in jail for this under prostitution laws, apparently helped them edit this. And legend has it that somewhere in a safe,
Man.
they've got all the hardcore footage and probably looped it all together and watched it until it all fell apart. It's for a porn movie, it's clearly very different. The sex scenes were easily excised. You can see where they were because little snippets of it remain. There were only about 4 or 5 of them. They probably could have made a better show of it if they had intended for it to be softcore. They could have shot it softcore. When you shoot it hardcore and then you try to make it softcore, you're just cutting stuff out and you may not have a lot to put in its place.
Well, let me
But
ask you this.
yeah.
I've read different things about this. So I've read that the Jason Williams and I can't remember the woman who plays the Dale Ardor character, that they did not actually do hardcore scenes. And then I've read that maybe they did, but were cut. But the hardcore scenes at the orgy, those are in the restored, hence to DVD and Blu-ray.
Even in the R-rated version. So there's a scene where they go to the Emperor Wang. Where they go to his throne room, there's all these naked bodies engaging in various bits there.
Yeah.
And if you look carefully, or even not that carefully, it's pretty obvious. Some of them are faking it, but some of them are clearly not.
It's Caligula-esque.
I mean, you're there, if the person you're with is willing, why the hell not? Strangely for this, so the scenes where there's a three-way on the traveling toward Mongo or Wango or whatever they call it. There's 2 gay scenes. One of them, the lesbian scene that every hardcore porno has. One of them, a male gay scene, which back in the 70s, that was not entirely unusual for porn films to include male homosexuality. At a certain point, by the time of the 80s, that was absolutely taboo. And I think part of what happened is the porn industry split up, and there were the all male films and the regular for straight guys or whatever porn films, and they stayed separate. I'll never forget. I went in 1978. I went with a bunch of my friends to New York. So we're high schoolers. We go to New York. We're wandering around, and we go past some of the more disreputable theaters. And there's one. It's the Bijou, all male film, and Boys in the Sand, whatever. And my girlfriend, not the sharpest knife in the drawer, looks at that and says, "Oh, good. So they're making movies for women too." And I'm just like, I don't have enough hands to throw in front of my face right now.
Nice to hear that a lot.
It depends on the woman,
I guess, but I think she would have been very lonely in that theater had she gone in, and maybe a little bit surprised. When we explained it to her, she was all grossed out. I'm like, well, what did you think is going to happen if there's nothing? But anyway, in her defense, she was cute. It's a good thing she was cute. So this movie is basically beat for beat a Flash Gordon movie. The Emperor Wang is throwing sex rays at the Earth, which causes people to just get uncontrollable because he's bad like that. So Flash and Dale meet up with Dr. Flexi Jerkoff. I mean, really, it's at the level of bad Mad Magazine stuff. They go to what is the I gotta find out what is the name of this planet? Porno. Oh, the planet Porno. Of course it was called the planet Porno. What else would it be?
Instead of Mongo, yeah.
And they go there and they have to fight penisauruses and rapist robots and all kinds of stuff going on. There's revolutions against Wang, who's pretty much done in the most elaborate yellow face makeup and yeah,
He's a
but
sick
you know
looking
what?
dude.
But boy, I'm glad they cut all the sex out because nothing stops a movie more. You know, when they were trying to do plots in porn movies, it's like, oh, here we got to put a scene in here, or else everyone's going to leave the theater. So now 5 minutes, and frankly, you know, it overstays its welcome. Maybe I'm weird like that, but I want more plot. So this one is nothing but plot, sets, special effects, mostly lame jokes, although occasionally it hits. Like when they get to porno, they open up the door, walk outside, and the scientist goes, "Good, there's oxygen." Okay, I just about fell out of my seat watching that. It's like, yeah, finally got the first movie to actually get that right is a porn movie. Go figure. Um, and then it all culminates in the end with a giant statue that comes to life as the great god, whatever Harryhausen is spelled backwards, that was his name. And he starts mumbling with the voice of Craig T. Nelson. Yeah, he wasn't originally supposed to speak, but the creature was so had so much emotion and was moving his lips. They put in it becomes very quotable. So there you go. There's this movie, and they released it. They made a fortune, made an absolute fortune. A lot of the folks who made this then went out and did the exact same thing with Alice in Wonderland, where they shot a porn film and then decided
Same
we spent too
producers,
much
yeah.
money on this, and we could probably show this in theaters all around the world if we just took all the hardcore sex out. So they did.
Yeah.
And it was only years later that they put some back in, but there's some creepiness about that I won't go into.
It's a bit like reminds me a bit of Caligula, where they tried to water that down by taking out the hardcore sex scenes because it was made that way originally.
Well, but they actually edited those in first. Then they took them back out.
And now they've put them back. And now apparently there's a brand new version coming out that has alternate scenes that have not been seen in any version.
And guess who did the liner notes for that? Chuck's wife.
I guess who did the commentary for it?
Oh, I thought she did the liner notes.
I was commentary.
That's even better.
May have also been liner notes, but yeah, she's seen the new cut.
Okay. So what you're saying is
not going to say anything about it, or well, I don't know.
We've got to do. We've done transgressive cinemas on things that we know a whole lot less about. We have an expert here. We got to do one on Caligula.
Well, Justin did do Caligula as one of the worst movies he'd seen for the first time in 2023. But yeah, we could always do an actual feature on it.
I'd really like to hear Chuck's insight on that. I mean,
I haven't seen it, so I haven't got a whole lot of insight at all.
No. Heather's always welcome to guest on the show, as I say, if y'all can.
Yeah.
Figure out
I'll pass it along.
Yeah. So
she's got some stories to tell. I just don't know what she's.
So has anyone else enjoyed Flesh Gordon?
Yeah. I liked it a lot. I mean, well, I didn't see it when I was young, but I read a lot about it because anything science fiction I read about, so I knew that existed. And I also thought it was kind of like this EC, the Wally Wood Flesh Garden parody, and actually they have a lot in common. It seemed like it was influenced by that too. But I was writing reviews for videos like in '96, and Hen's Tooth Video just put out the videotape, and it was like the first time it had the version that had the hardcore orgy scenes restored. There weren't any hardcore scenes between any of the lead actors. Plenty of softcore. Candy Samples is in it also, and
yeah, she is
when she was a bit firmer, and so it was pretty.
And she's great. She's got a wooden leg, a hook for a hand, and an eye patch.
Yes, she's scarier than usual. Right. Not as scary as later without those things, but yeah. So I loved it. I mean, and being into Flash Gordon my whole life, all versions. I thought it was fantastic. I thought it was a great adaptation, and the whole period thing of it. It just, I don't know, it was just wonderful. And then I don't have the Blu-ray yet, but the Blu-ray is supposedly the same transfer, maybe run back through 4K or 2K. So it's more it's the most uncut you'll see. I mean, it's X, but it's not pardon the pun, not literally, not in your face.
Yeah.
X.
It's
from
Emmanuel X, not Deep Throat X.
Yeah. What do you think, Justin?
Yeah, well, I liked it. I saw it in the well, I've got a funny story to begin with. So back in the mid 1980s, in the days of the old video cassettes hired from a shop, my mum hired what she thought was Flash Gordon, and for a 12-year-old birthday party. And then the intro comes on with this sort of cheesy music, and Mum suddenly whipped off the video. And we said, "Hey, what's going on? What's going on?" He said, "I think I've got the wrong video. It was supposed to be Flash Gordon, and it came up Flash Gordon." She goes, "Oh, that's not correct." But then I subsequently, in my 20s, I think I saw it as, so you're talking in the 90s now. In New Zealand, we used to have this thing once a year called the Incredibly Strange Film Festival. And it was featured at one of those festivals. I remember watching it then. It's very dim in my mind because it's more than 20 years ago, but I do recall enjoying it at the time. And it was it wasn't hardcore, as we've heard, but it was it had that little bit of cheesiness and bit of sleaze to it that it was quite good in that context, I thought.
A lot of sleaze, but it's kind of like to me, it was like a proto Rocky Horror kind of thing. Just like locker room humor and innuendos and gender bending, and like Prince Baron is Prince Precious, so he's like this gay archer who's trying to lay flesh, excuse me, and it's a little ambiguous as to whether Flesh, may or may not be up to it. Maybe in the original script he was, but I thought it was great. One second. Oh yeah, I actually reviewed it for an actual real magazine when I wrote for Video Eyeball when we did the drive-in issue. I did a review of it, so that was pretty cool. That was fun. So I have a long history with it now. I'm eventually I'll get it on Blu-ray. It did come out. Chuck, have you seen it?
I don't believe I've seen it in its entirety. I was living in Europe around the time it was first making the rounds, and I saw scenes from it and previews for it on French TV because, they're way ahead over there. And I remember thinking, 12 or 13-year-old me, that looked pretty entertaining. Have I seen it since then? I've seen bits and pieces, I can say. But
I've seen it probably too many times.
But there are points in time from the 90s, from the, I don't know, mid 90s to about early 2000s, where I was watching a lot of movies and I was under a lot of altered states at the time and may not be able to comment exactly on what I saw. So
Petty Chayefsky was a hell of a writer, man. I thought.
They made a sequel.
Yes, they did.
They made a sequel to that, but it wasn't very good, apparently. And it was intention. Yeah. Flesh Gordon and the Cosmic Cheerleaders.
And it was hardcore, and it was many years later. And
oh, really? It was hardcore? Oh, didn't know
from
that.
what I understand, it was hardcore. I could be wrong, but if it was softcore, it was a waste because there's no other way they could have sold it as bad as it
looked. And it didn't have the stop motion animation. So two things. One, I saw this early in the 80s in St. Louis at a repertoire theater that showed, I think it was on a double feature with an absolutely dreadful film called Gums, which was a satire of Jaws, and is one of the, I'll talk about another, next time we talk about bad movies, I'll talk about Gums, because this is the most baffling X-rated movie ever made for reasons I don't want to get into.
Heard of it,
but I swear to God that it was more hardcore. I don't know if it was hardcore, but the scenes were less cut than I see them now. When I watched it again for the first time years later, I'm like, I remember that being a lot harder than it is now.
Mm.
So I don't know if I saw, when they're doing this kind of cutting, sometimes there are stories where people swear I saw this movie's version they say never got out.
The
You know,
Mandela effect, allegedly, but
it could
sometimes it's
be.
true though.
Now, I
Sometimes
hadn't
it's
seen a
true.
lot of X-rated movies, so maybe my brain was just filling in some of the stuff that got cut out. Boy,
Pervert.
I mean, you know what? I was 18. It's the other thing is that there's a sequence in here, one of the best special effects sequences, the one I think was done by Jim Danforth, is the Beetle Man.
Mm.
And it's where Flesh fights this creature, this Beetle Man. It comes out and it's like a sword fight. And it's okay, it may not be Ray Harryhausen's Sinbad against a skeleton. It's pretty damn good. And it shows, a real
It was
genius
fun.
at work here. It's well done. Well, that Beetle Man, the armature, the internal skeleton that they used for stop motion animation, these are very hard to make. And if you can, you reuse them, even if that means stripping down the original. That came from Pete Peterson, who was a special effects whiz, one of the greatest animators of all time, but he hardly gets any credit. He was Willis O'Brien's assistant in the later years.
Okay.
He's the one who really animated the Black Skeleton and the Giant Behemoth. And then he did a few things on his own. This guy had multiple sclerosis or something. He was crippled and yet was able to do this marvelous animation. He did a thing called The Beetlemen, which was about a bunch of astronauts who come back mutated from outer space. And they found a tiny little clip of it in a locker room years after he died. And it's absolutely phenomenal. If you go on YouTube and just look for
Mm.
The Beetle and see what it is, and you're like, wow, what could have been? Well, apparently they used that armature. One of the Beetleman armatures got to Jim Danforth, and that's what was used to make this Beetleman. And I think it was probably kind of a bit of an homage to Pete Peterson.
That's
So
fantastic.
yeah, so I mean, it is what it is. Don't go in expecting. Obviously, it is a sleazy porn movie. It's got porn movie style acting, but it has
But
better,
yeah, it's funny.
above average set design, special effects, everything else about it. It's way up there than the average 70s science fiction movie of the time
Yep.
for an indie. Maybe not Hollywood, although I think there's some Hollywood sci-fi out there that doesn't have half the imagination. But when you get a crew like this,
Oh
a
yeah.
dream crew who are, willing to not put their names on the credit, but they're gonna not, just because this is a paycheck doesn't mean they don't have pride in their work. This is the kind of thing they get.
And they
Did you,
all
did-
worked on Star Wars
right, right.
later.
And
But
that's another thing. Why did Star Wars do what it did? They got the best of the best. They got the best people out there.
yeah,
Most Hollywood producers didn't know their names, but I guess George
they got
Lucas did.
all those guys.
Yeah. And Magic,
Dykstra and Trumbull.
right.
Oh my god.
Magic was made.
Yeah.
Do you want me to do the second film as well?
No, let's go to another person, and hopefully we won't run out of room for your
Yeah.
second. But I do want to say one quick thing about the movie. There is one scene in the 1980 film Flash Gordon by Mike Hodges that is actually adapted from Flesh Gordon, not from the comic strip or the Buster Crab. And it's where he and Aura, I forgot what they call her in the Flesh Gordon, but Princess Aura and Flash are on that crazy spaceship. And the spaceships look just like the Alex Raymond drawings in Flesh Gordon, I have to say. And they do in Mike Hodges too, but they're riding in the clouds, and she like straddles him and is trying to have sex with him, and that's like it's the same scene. They just like remade it. So
Yeah.
Dino De Laurentiis was probably also a fan.
Interesting.
But Chuck, how do you feel about going next?
I can do that.
Cool.
Yeah, I can do that. Okay, well, the first movie I saw when I was the first movie I'm going to talk about. I saw when I was probably 7 or 8 years old, and found it to be, much to my surprise, the absolute height of hilarity. And well, I did at the time anyway. This is not a great film. This is not a good film. This is not a particularly smart film. This is really not a funny film, although God, it sure tries. This is the preface I can give this is it's not every day you see the stupidest thing you've ever seen. And this thing starts off like a note perfect any science fiction like alien invasion kind of movie from that time. This came out in 1962. It starts off with stock shots of the army base, stock shots of all the nuclear arms, stock shots of people sitting at radar and stuff like that, with the very somber narration and the theremin music playing in the background. And suddenly you just have these two flunkies screwing up with a garden hose and spraying each other. And we're not in Kansas anymore. This is Invasion of the Star Creatures, which has way too much fun being itself. This thing, I don't know, has these two stars who are not particularly charismatic, not particularly good looking. I guess they're trying to exhibit what I guess are comic chops. One guy occasionally lapses into random Edward G. Robinson imitations. Then on top of that, you've got all this tomfoolery. You've got this sergeant who doesn't seem to be much of a superior, but he's basically going around talking in a kind of this mock beatnik patois. And they go to the colonel's office where he's commandeering this mission, and the colonel is sitting there in a room which, best way I can describe it is think it's almost like the wood panel room that is the same room that maybe Herschel Gordon Lewis shot all his police station scenes, or I don't know. I like to refer to it as Flesh World. It's almost like that wood paneling. I see it, and
it has a lot of character in his movies, though. In my opinion.
Yeah. Oh, my wife and I just always point it whenever we see wood paneling in the movie, we point it out, and we're just like, look at that. It's Flesh World. Yeah. Hey, why are they shooting this in Flesh World? But for all you Twin Peaks fans out there. Anyway, he has these two flunkies join some more serious looking individuals and the pseudo beatnik sergeant to go out and investigate this big explosion out in the desert somewhere. So they go out there, and basically because these two guys decide to screw around and just kind of ditch and grab a little lunch out of their backpacks, the other soldiers wander into this cave. You get a setup in this cave where you're walking down this walkway, and it's going down in 3 or 4 levels in kind of a zigzag pattern, and they go down every level of this zigzag, and then at some point it breaks off and they're all running out of separate entrances like a Scooby-Doo flick, or like a Scooby-Doo kind of thing. And if you don't think it's funny, don't worry, because you're going to see it another 8 times. And they get captured by these aliens. You don't really see these lumbering tree creatures, people in tree suits. But the two other guys who were, basically the complete idiots show up, and they're the Abbott and Costello type characters. And they finally go in there and find out the tree androids, or whatever they are commanded by these two 7-foot tall, gorgeous alien women who are looking to colonize Earth or whatever. And it ends up in this big, crazy hoo-ha. It's all kinds of intrigue and chaos. And at one point, they're being held captive. At another point, they're all running into the wilderness and trying to get their commander to come get them, and the tree people are chasing them, and they throw rocks at the tree people, and that doesn't hurt. That doesn't help really, but anyway, I think eventually they use their wits to defeat them, which is, I guess, they duck when the trees are swinging at them.
Like what wits?
But yeah, somehow they miraculously concoct wits in this thing. Ducking connotes wits. But anyway, they go to the colonel. The colonel, he's set up in that flesh world office. He's got a photo of himself, a noble picture of himself on the wall that keeps changing in every scene. So he's laughing or he's sneering in the picture in relation to whatever he's doing on camera. And it's just like the walkway. If you don't think that's funny, don't worry. You're going to see it 15 more times. And
cakes, yeah.
And so the movie leans hard into these gags, which are not particularly funny, but credit for trying. And so there ends up being this kind of big confrontation between these two idiots and the colonel. But the one idiot he's apparently a action show, which is he's got a secret decoder ring. Well, the colonel has the same secret decoder ring. And
can you repeat that critical plot point, because it froze. You froze for a second.
Oops.
I don't know if it's you or me, but it froze.
Yeah, I don't know.
It might have been me. I'm not sure. I don't know if everyone else saw you freeze or not, but
we'll find out.
No, that might have been mine.
Yeah.
Well, just pick up where you left off then.
Just the colonel and this Joker basically argue over the veracity of their claims, and it turns out that this one guy, well, it's kind of a running plot point. It's part of this fan club for this space age kid show that has these, you send in the box tops from boxes of cereal, and you eventually get these secret rings, these decoder rings or whatever, and it makes you a member of the club. And it turns out that the colonel is a member of the same stupid club, and they compare their decoder rings. The guy in the fan club has a higher, the idiot in the fan club has a higher ranking than the colonel does. And so the colonel starts taking orders from him. And so then they go out and they meet these, not in addition to the hot, sexy alien women and the sexism and whatnot, and the good old-fashioned male chauvinism, they run into a group of Indians, and I stress, the worst kind of stereotype Indian characters, Native Americans, and they're all on the warpath and they're going to take out their hunting knives. Only it turns out they're all members of this same stupid fan club. And so they all kind of join forces. I don't know. It's crazy. In any event, they end up going back to the aliens' base, screwing up their just by sheer fooling around with the machinery. They destroy their rocket, stranding these aliens on Earth. And the two gorgeous aliens have no real recourse but to submit to our brave idiots and become their girlfriends.
Oh, of course.
And that's how the movie ends. And the levels on which, between the badly stereotyped Native Americans and the, male chauvinism conquers all. Plus, the, gratuitous objectification, this thing, I cannot emphasize the ways in which this thing has not aged well. But, I've got to say, I sat down and watched this for like the hour and 10 minutes it's on, and in that hour and 10 minutes, this thing is so stupid that it just bent my brain. And I almost feel like it deserves credit for that. I just...
Is your brain bendable usually?
my brain's been bent by other things, but never normally something that idiotic. And I mean, I literally had to get up and kind of walk around for a bit to make sure there were still molecules underneath me after that. So I don't know. I guess a good time was had by all, sort of.
I saw it a while back. It was on that DVD with Invasion of the Bee Girls, and they were nothing alike. Invasion of the Bee Girls was quite good, I think.
I've got that on a comp somewhere.
Anitra Ford, she's awesome. I even told her, I managed to find her on Facebook. I told her, man, you were great in Big Birdcage, Invasion of the Bee Girls, and Messiah of Evil. She's like, oh, thank you.
Oh, yeah.
75
Messiah of Evil's killer, man.
Oh, I know. That's a classic.
But
have you seen that one, Bill? Or suffered through it? Or...
I've seen pieces of it, and it convinced me I saw all that I needed to see. now
you're dead on that.
You've talked me into wanting to see it now. Now I feel like I got to see an endurance test.
Yeah, it's a short endurance test, if that helps you out.
I do appreciate that a lot of these terrible movies are short.
Yeah.
They don't ever stay there welcome.
Yeah.
Too much. Wow. Okay, well, thanks, CF. That was interesting.
Sorry.
Hi, you've been watching Deep Images. I'm Henry Covert, your host. This is Bergie Williams and CF Roberts, two of our most amazing panelists. And we've been talking about an incredible series here. We do these series sessions every so often. We break them into individual episodes. So we wanted to kind of give you a segue and let you know what you've just watched and what you can look forward to. So just want to remind you, thank you for watching. And please like and subscribe and support the channel any way you can. Do you guys have anything to say?
Yeah, like, subscribe, come back, see us. We don't bite. Type, type, type.
Do you like that? We like that. Let me tell you something. Leave some comments.
Hell yeah.
Leave something in chat. If you like us, talk to us. If you don't like us, talk to us. We want to hear from you.
All right. Y'all have a good evening. Thanks for watching.